Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Priyanka Neela Krishnan Show with me, Priyanka Neela Krishnan. And this is Enterprise Security Series, episode 49. And today's topic, your next breach has a badge. So, little bit about myself. So, I am Priyanka Neela Krishnan. I've been in the enterprise security space for more than 14 years, and I love doing this job, and that's my passion. I've written a couple of security books. One is Autonomous Data Security. It's about 300 to 400 pages. It was published by April Springer Nature. And the second book on security is Jailbreaking LLMs. So that is published by Springer Nature, April Springer Nature, and it's about 750 to 800 pages. It's very detailed. So if you're someone seriously caring about enterprise data security or how to protect or use LLMs in a more secure fashion in your enterprise, I would recommend these books to you. All right. Now, coming to the show, this show is for security and business leaders who want signal, no noise, but about just the signal in the enterprise data risk space. As always, one thing upfront, this is my independent commentary, my way of educating the world, my own views, and not those of any employer, product, or vendor. Today, we are turning our threat model around. Most of what we build faces outward at the attacker trying to get in. But a large and expensive share of the damage comes from people who are already inside, who already hold the keys, and who most of the time never meant any harm at all. Over the next 15 minutes, I'll show you what insider risk actually looks like, why it is mostly not the villain you picture, and how to design an environment where one careless click cannot become a breach. Let's dig in. So, your threat model has a shape, and the shape points outward. Attackers out there, defenses in here, a wall between. But the data keeps telling a different story. A huge share of the damage comes from people who are already inside, who already have the keys, and who most of the time never meant to cause any harm at all. The employee who emailed a file to a personal account to work from home. The contractor whose access basically outlived the contract. This episode is about the risk with a badge. I am Priyanka Neela Krishnan, and let's talk about the threat that is already through the door. Let me start by pointing out a bias built into almost every security program. It faces outward. We picture attackers out there, our defenses in here, and a wall in between. And we pour most of our budget into that wall. Perimeter, email gateway, endpoint, network, all aimed at keeping the outsider from getting in. But the data keeps pointing in the opposite direction. A large and growing share of the cost of security incidents comes not from someone breaking in, but from someone who is already inside, using access you granted on purpose. Employees, contractors, partners, people with a badge. And here's the part that surprises leaders the most. The majority of these incidents are not malicious. They are not spies or anything of that sort. They are just ordinary people making ordinary mistakes or cutting corners to get their work done with access far broader than their job actually required. The outward facing wall does nothing to stop any of that because the threat is already standing on the safe side of it. This is not an argument to stop defending the perimeter. Outsiders are real. It is an argument to notice that you have been fighting mostly in one direction, while a significant part of the damage comes from the other. Your next breach may not knock, it may already have a disk and a login and a lanyard. Let me contrast the insider we imagine with the insider we actually get. On the left is the story we tell ourselves, the malicious spy, a disgruntled employee who deliberately steals secrets on the way out the door, or plans something destructive out of spite. It is dramatic, it makes for a good headline, and it is where a lot of insider threat spending quietly goes. On the right is the reality that shows up in the incident data over and over. The careless colleague, a good employee under deadline pressure who emails a customer database to their personal Gmail so they can finish the work from home. A well meaning contractor who uploads a sensitive file to a convenient tool nobody vetted. Someone who was granted access to a system years ago for one task and still has it. These are not villains. They are your best people moving fast, using access they should never have had in the first place. The malicious insider is real but rare. The negligent insider is common and mundane, and that is exactly why it is so costly. It does not trip your villain detection systems, but there is no villain. There is just a trusted person, a bad person, and data within reach that never should have been. If you build your entire insider program around catching the spy, you will miss the far larger problem sitting in plain sight at every desk. Here is a number that should move insider risk up your priority list. According to the 2026 Cost of Insider Risks report from the Ponemon Institute and DTX, the average annual cost of insider risk reached $19.5 million per organization. That is up from 17.4 million the year before, and it has more than doubled since 2018. So this is not a niche tail risk concern that lives in a corner of the security world. It is a large, growing, top line cost center. That figure covers the full life cycle of insider incidents: the monitoring, the investigation, the escalation, the response, the containment, and the remediation. And it is drawn from a serious study, thousands of interviews across hundreds of organizations that actually experienced insider events. What makes the trend line so telling is the direction. Almost every part of the security has gotten more attention and more tooling over the past decade. And yet, insider risk costs keep climbing up and up. That tells you the outward facing investments, as necessary as they are, do not touch this problem. You can have a world class perimeter and still bleed $20 million a year to people who already have access. The insider is now, by cost, one of the most expensive classes of incident an organization lives through, and most programs are still funding it like an afterthought. Let me add one point that leaders often miss. The rise of AI agents and automation is expanding what counts as an insider. An AI assistant with broad access to your systems, acting on behalf of an employee, is effectively an insider with superhuman speed and reach. If a human insider making a mistake is costly, an over-permissioned automated agent making the same class of mistake is costly at machine scale. So, everything in this episode about limiting reach and watching the data flow applies just as much to your non human insiders as your human insiders. The badge is not always worn by a person anymore. Sometimes it belongs to a process, and that process can reach further and faster than any employee ever could. Two numbers that tell you where to actually aim. First, roughly 55% of insider incidents are caused by negligent or mistaken employees, not malicious ones. And if you add in credential theft, where an outsider is operating with a legitimate employee's stolen login, then about three quarters of all insider incidents are non malicious in the sense that no trusted employee set out to cause harm. This is the single most important fact about insider risk, and it should redirect your strategy. Most organizations overinvest in detecting the rare malicious insider and underinvest in the far larger, far more frequent problem of good people with too much access making mistakes. Second, the average time to contain an insider incident is around 67 days. Now, the good news is that number is improving. If it basically it used to be well over 80, so now it's better. But 2 months is still a very long time for an incident to run inside your environment. And containment speed maps directly to cost. Incidents caught and contained quickly cost a fraction of those that drag on. So the strategy writes itself from these two numbers. Reduce the negligent incidents by shrinking what people can reach and shorten the containment window by actually watching how data moves. You're not hunting a mastermind. You're managing ordinary human error at scale and designing so that a single mistake cannot become a catastrophe. So, here is a reframe, and it changes where you spend your energy. Stop hunting the villain. The dominant form of insider risk is not a bad person, it is a good person plus a bad process, plus data they were able to reach that they never should have been able to reach. Once you see it that way, the solution stops being surveillance and suspicion and starts being design. You cannot fire your way out of insider risk because the problem is not who your people are, it is what your environment lets them to. If a well meaning employee can, in a moment of deadline pressure, export your entire customer database and email it to themselves, that is not primarily a personal failure, it is an architecture failure. The database should never have been that reachable, that exportable, and that unmonitored. This is where insider risk connects directly to something we have covered before on this show: least privilege. The single most effective thing you can do about insider risk is shrink what any one person can touch. If access is scoped tightly to what each role actually needs, then a careless click has a small blast radius instead of a catastrophic one. And a malicious insider, if you do have one, inherits far less to steal. You're not trying to build a workforce of science, you're trying to build an environment where ordinary human fallibility cannot turn into a headline. Three moves for your Monday. First, reduce what insiders can reach. This is least privilege again, and I keep returning to it because it is the highest leverage control you could have. The smaller the access each role holds, the smaller the damage from any mistake or any misuse. Every overbroad grant is an insider incident waiting for an occasion. Second, watch the data, not just the person. The most effective insider detection is not profiling your employees or reading their messages. It is monitoring how sensitive data moves. A sudden mass export, a copy to a personal account, access to a store this role never touches. The signal lives in the data flow, and watching the flow respects your people while still catching the dangerous events. Third, fix the friction people route around. This is one which is a little underrated. A huge share of negligent insider incidents start with a security control so clunky that people bypass it just to get their jobs done. The employee emails the file to personal Gmail because the sanctioned way to share it is painful. So make the secure path the easy path. I repeat, make the secure path the easy path. If you do not, your people will keep going around you, and every workaround is a new exposure. Reduce the reach, watch the flow, remove the friction. Do these three, and you have addressed the actual shape of insider risk, which is good people, too much access, and processes that fight them. Let me close by naming what this episode is really about because it connects to everything on the show, the Enterprise Security Show, with me, Priyanka Neela Krishnan. The badge is not the enemy. Your employees, your contractors, your partners, they are the organization. You cannot run a business without extending trust to people, and you should not want to. The enemy is ungoverned access sitting behind the badge. It is the fact that a trusted person can reach far more data than their job requires, export it with no friction, and do it with no one watching the flow. Fix that, and the trusted insider stays trustworthy. Because a mistake stays small and a bad actor inherits little. This is why insider risk is not really a separate discipline from the rest of security. It is the same discipline, governance of data and access, viewed from the inside instead of outside. The organizations losing $20 million a year to insiders are not the ones with worse people. They are the ones who left too much reachable and watched the wrong direction. So turn some of that outward facing attention inward. Assume your next breach might already have a badge and build an environment where that does not have to mean disaster. You cannot fire your way out of this, but you can design your way out, one narrowed permission at a time. Again, this is me, Priyanka Neela Krishnan. I am an author of a couple of security books. Autonomous Data Security is the first book. The second book, Jailbreaking LLMs, Large Language Models. This is the source slide from which I've gathered the content and references for this presentation today. I'll give you a few seconds to glance through. All right. So this was episode 49. Remember this one. You cannot fire your way out of the insider risk because most of it is a good employee, a bad process, and data they should have never been able to reach. Shrink what people can touch, watch how the data moves, and remove the friction that makes people route around you. If this was useful, subscribe and share it with whoever owns identity and access and data security or any security in your organization, and tell me in the comments whether your insider program is aimed at catching the rare villain or reducing the common mistake. The answer says a lot. I am Priyanka Neela Krishnan, and this has been my independent commentary on enterprise data security, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, Stay safe, stay secure, be happy. Bye, everybody.